Hello everyone. In today's lecture, we are going to talk about free radicals. So in previous lectures, we talked about other reactive intermediates. You might have studied in your class as well what is a reactive intermediate. Reactive intermediate is something which is formed in between the reactants and products, right? And it can actually be isolated. It's not a hypothetical thing. It is something which is actually formed between reactants and products and it can be isolated. Some of the examples of the reactive intermediates are carbocations, carbanions, free radicals, carbenes, and then we have benzines, and then we have halides, right? So in today's lecture, we'll be focusing on this reactive intermediate, a species which is formed between reactant and products and have an odd electron, right? So we'll talk about them in detail. Now, what is a free radical? A free radical is a chemical species that contains odd electron. Now, how does it look like? Now, we know that in chemistry, there are only two things happening. Either bond is breaking, bond breakage, right? Or a new bond is formed. Now, this bond cleavage or breaking of the bond can happen in two ways, right? So suppose I have a molecule AX where X is more electronegative than A, right? Which means that the tendency to attract the shared pair of electrons is more for X as compared to for A, or X has more tendency to attract the shared pair of electrons towards itself. And because of this pair of electrons, we know that when we draw a bond between two things, it means two electrons. So X is more electronegative, so it withdraw both the electrons towards itself. And what we get is A positive and this X is negative. Why? Because the electron which belonged to A is now taken by X. So A is now positive electron. It has actually lost an electron while X has taken that electron because of its high electronegativity. So such a bond fission or bond cleavage is called heterolytic bond cleavage or heterolytic bond breakage or heterolytic bond cleavage or bond fission, right? Now, it can happen that I have a molecule A and B where both of them have same electronegativity. Okay, so the shared pair of electron is shared equally between A and B. In such a case, if you create suitable reaction conditions and the bond breaks, then the bond will break like this, that each of the atoms take away their own shared electron. Okay, so it's just for the sake of understanding. So this green electron belonged to A and say this pink electron belonged to B, right? So once they have shared that, both the electrons belong to both A and B. But when you break that bond, then each of the atoms take away one of the electrons. So since it was earlier also from them, so they don't carry any charge after the cleavage. So these species which are formed, we call them free radicals or just radicals. Okay, they have an odd electron. They're not charged because they have not taken someone's electron or lost some electron. It's just they have an odd electron, so they are called free radicals. Fine. For example, if you irradiate a molecule of chlorine with a light of suitable frequency, so what would happen? You will get chloride free radical. Now, important thing here is two chloride free radicals. Important thing is to notice is that what type of arrows I'm using. I am using an arrow like this, which is called a half hooked arrow or a fish hooked arrow. Half hooked arrow or a fish hooked arrow or a fish barbed arrow, right? This arrow shows the movement of one electron. It shows the movement of one electron. While if you observe here, I used an arrow which looked like this, a full arrow, which shows the movement of two electrons. Fine. So for free radical reactions or for homolysis, we use fish hooked arrow or half hooked arrow. It is very important because if you draw the full arrow, it would be considered incorrect for generating a free radical. Fine. Now, let's try to understand, like, because we are studying organic chemistry, so our interest is more on the alkyl free radicals or organic free radicals like methyl free radical, ethyl free radical, right? Both of them, they are primary free radicals, right? If you have a free radical like this, you call it secondary free radical because the odd electron is present on a carbon which is secondary. That is, it is connected to two more carbons. Here, it is connected to only one, so we call it primary. Fine. Similarly, we would have tertiary had it been CH3 here. We'll call it tertiary because now the odd electron bearing carbon would be connected to three carbons. Fine. Now, let's try to first understand the structure of a free radical, alkyl free radical. So let's take the simplest example of methyl free radical. We are trying to understand its geometry or structure. The central carbon here is, the central atom is carbon and it is neutral. 1s2, 2s2, 2p4. That is the configuration. I'm sorry, it is 2p. I'm sorry, it's 2p2 because we are talking about the carbon, not of oxygen. Fine. Which means carbon in this state is this. And for P we have 3, right? Now in the excited state, like in the bonding, when it's, now we are more focusing on the valence shell because that's where the things happen in bonding. So one of the electron gets excited to 2p orbital from the 2s orbital, from here to here, right? So this is carbon in the excited state when the bonding happens, right? Now in this state, carbon undergoes sp2 hybridization because if you see in methyl radical, you have 3 bonds and 1 odd electron, right? So it undergoes sp2 hybridization. And the unhybridized, this is the unhybridized p orbital. The unhybridized p orbital has the odd electron. And because of sp2 hybridization, the geometry would be trigonal planar. Not exactly trigonal planar, but it would be more closely related to, we can call it a shallow pyramid. Shallow pyramid, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll say it is a planar, trigonal planar type of the thing. Okay. Now, since it has its orbital is not, its octet is not complete, so it would act as an electrophile, like electron loving species. So free radicals are electrophilic in nature. Now, since now we know about their geometry, now we will talk about the stability of various free radicals. Like if I need to compare the stability of methyl free radical, say with the another primary free radical, right? Secondary free radical, right? And then we have the tertiary free radical. Which out of them is more stable? So the stability order of free radicals, it follows the same pattern as was observed for carbocations. That is, tertiary free radical is more stable than secondary, which in turn is more stable than primary, which in turn is more stable than methyl free radical. Now, why is it so? This stability order can be explained with the help of this phenomena, which is called hyperconjugation. We'll see what it is. Now, if you look at this carbon, this one, let's focus on this one, okay? So if I focus on that, I would have CH3, right? And then CH2, which contains the odd electrons. So I'm drawing the odd electron in this orbital, right? So considering this to be planar, so since this is electron deficient, okay, and we know that the more a charge spreads, or the more an electron has the space to move around, the greater the delocalization of an electron or a charge, the more is the stability. So in this particular structure, this odd electron belongs to this carbon, right? But since this bond, carbon-carbon bond, is free to rotate, this means that these electrons and they lie in one plane. So these electrons, the sigma bond electrons, they can be donated to this p orbital to form a pi bond. What does this mean? Means one of the electrons from this bond, right, and the other from this bond, they can form a double bond, while this hydrogen would have the odd electron now. Fine. So let's try to draw that. So the electron from this here and from this here. Please see, I'm using the fish hooked arrow or the half hooked arrow, and I'm drawing the double-headed the same way we do for resonance, because hyperconjugation is a type of resonance, sigma pi resonance. I will explain why it is called sigma pi resonance. The other name for that is no bond resonance. The third name for this is Baker-Nathan process or effect, Baker-Nathan effect, right? Now, I would have CCH, right? H and H, and one H here, another one here, and a double bond between these two carbons, while that hydrogen is now having the odd electron, right? Because here we had two electrons. Of them, the carbon shared one of the electrons which it earlier shared with this hydrogen. Now it is sharing with the other carbon, and we require two electrons to make a bond. So one of the electrons coming from here, the other one from there, to form a double bond, right? Now all these hydrogens, they are the same, but just for the sake of understanding, I am giving them some names, okay? So, or we can highlight them. So this is the yellow one, then we have this pink one, then we have this blue one, right? So the yellow one has done its work. Now the pink one can come there. Why? Because this bond is free to rotate. So if it keeps on rotating, sometimes this yellow one faces this p orbital, another time this pink one would be here and can do the same work, right? So what we can have two more resonating structures, one where, so since some students would get confused, so I would actually draw it as a rough work. I would draw it here, that this is now the scenario. You have an odd electron And now the pink one is coming there, the purple or the pink, the way you want to say, right? And the yellow one and the blue one, they are there, right? Fine. Now the same thing can happen with this pink one, that electron from here, from there, and the odd electron remains there, right? So we need not to show it every time. We just do it in our mind. The same thing can happen there. So we'll draw the ultimate structure, odd electron, H and H, C, H and H, right? So I would draw the double bond here and will color this one and this one and this one, right? So this is the resonating structure. Fine. The other resonating structure is possible with the blue one. Fine. So I would draw the third resonating structure when the blue hydrogen, although we cannot distinguish, but that is we are drawing the different possibilities, right? So hydrogen, 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 double bond, right? So double bond here, and now we have the participating hydrogen is the blue one, right? And the rest of them, they are hydrogen with the yellow or with the pink one, right? So for ethyl free radical or a primary free radical, we have 3 resonating structures, or overall 4 resonating structures, or 4 hyperconjugative structures. That's better. So we have 4 hyperconjugative structures, right? Which means that this odd electron has a freedom, and it is spending time on this carbon and on the 3 hydrogens on the neighboring carbon. Why it is called sigma pi resonance hyperconjugation? Because it is the sigma electrons which are used up in forming the pi bond. So that's why it is called sigma pi resonance. Why it is called no bond resonance? Because during the hyperconjugation, when we draw the hyperconjugative structure, there is no bond between this carbon and this hydrogen which is involved in the whole process. No sigma bond, so no bond resonance, right? Now, this was for the primary free radical. Primary free radical, fine. Now, if I take the example of secondary free radical, I would have CH3 and CH3, right? CH3, CH3 and H and free radical, okay? Now, if I want to draw the odd, the way we have drawn for that. So CH3, this is the carbon. Just a moment. Carbon with the odd electron, right? So it has this odd electron, right? And it has this CH3 here, and to the next it has this CH3. So this is connected now to 2 CH3s, right? Directly connected. So this one, if I highlight this with, so this one has 1, 2, 3, so which can form a double bond. So the same way we would have 4 resonating structures. And similarly, this CH3, it can also do the same thing as this one, because it is also it's also connected the same way. So we'll have overall 3 structures with respect to this CH3, 3 structures or hyperconjugative structures with respect to this CH3, and along with this we'll have 7 hyperconjugative structures, right? So you can draw it in the same way as you have drawn for the ethyl free radical. Assuming that it is an ethyl free radical, you can draw for this one, this one, this one, and after that you can draw for this one, right? And for tertiary, so if I have a tertiary free radical, I would have 10 hyperconjugative structures, because I can draw 3 with respect to with this one, 3 with respect to this CH3, and 3 with respect to this, and the 10th one is this. So the number of hyperconjugative structures possible is equals to 1 more than the number of hydrogens in the alpha, attached to the alpha carbon, like the carbon which is next to the odd electron bearing carbon. So the carbon next to the carbon bearing the odd electrons are 1, 2, and 3. And how many total hydrogens? 9. So 9 plus 1 is 10. So 10 hyperconjugative structures. Now, more the number of hyperconjugative structures, more is the dispersal of the odd electron, right? And the more is the stability. And that's why tertiary free radical is more stable than secondary, which in turn is more stable than primary, which in turn is more stable than methyl free radical. Fine. Now, when we come to the free radicals with the double bonds, like we have this free radical, like this is the molecule, and if I draw the free radical, the allyl free radical, this is the allyl free radical. Allyl free radical. Why? Because the odd electron is present on the allylic carbon. Which carbon is the allylic carbon? This is the allylic carbon. That is the carbon which is connected to the double bond. It's not the part of the double bond. These are vinylic carbons, and just next to that would be the allylic carbons. Okay, carbon which is separated from a double bond through a single bond, that's called allylic carbon. And if the odd electron is present on the allylic carbon, we call it allyl free radical. Now, for allyl free radical, the actual resonance can take place. So the odd electron from here and one of the electrons from there, right? One of the electrons from there, half-hooked arrow, right? And double-headed arrow to show that it is resonance which is taking place. And now we would have an odd electron onto this carbon, because it would have its odd electron onto it, right? So this is allyl free radical, and whenever a species shows stability because of resonance, then its stability is more as compared to any other effect, inductive effect or something. So allyl free radical is more stable than alkyl free radical. More stable than alkyl free radicals. Okay, because here the actual charge, actual dispersal takes place because of the resonance. Similarly, if I have benzyl free radical, so this is, suppose I have this radical. Okay, so now this electron from here and that electron from there, they can form a double bond, right? And I would have CH2 there and odd electron here, and so on. Similarly, here, here, and here. So it's just the half-hooked arrows I'm drawing all the time, right? So CH2, a double bond here, a double bond here, and odd electron is now here. Now, on similar lines, we would have odd electron there, and we'll have CH2, a double bond, and similarly half-hooked arrow, and we'll get the other Kekulé structure, which is a double bond, and CH2. So there are 5 resonating structures for benzyl free radical. So it is much more stable than the allyl free radical because there are more number of resonating structures. So for benzyl free radical is more stable. Okay, if I have, say, diphenyl methyl free radical, like 2 phenyl rings Okay, so this would have more number of resonating structures and it would be more stable as compared to even benzyl free radical. So that was all about the free radicals, and in the next video we'll talk about the free radical reactions of alkanes or halogenation of alkanes more specifically. Thank you.